Preface. I have no intention of explaining how I acquired the following manuscript. That is its own rather sordid tale, albeit not nearly as important as the one you are about to read. Who knows? Perhaps if this book is successful enough to spawn a paperback version one day, that tale will be the bonus material added later to encourage you to purchase the story once more in a different format. Better yet, when we sell the movie rights, the filmmakers will then have the creative license to add the backstory themselves should they so desire. Or maybe that is a tale better left untold by me or anyone else altogether. It only adds to the mystery. However, it is perfectly reasonable to ask if what you're about to read is true in the truest sense of the word. Or is the whole thing made up? Is this live, or is it memorex, so to speak? Was this manuscript really passed on to me to pass on to you? Or is this all from the depths of my imagination? I should hope and pray the latter isn't true, as should you, because it would be quite disturbing to discover one of our fellow Americans has a vivid enough imagination to foresee such pure darkness regarding the country we share and love. Even more disturbing for me would be the discovery that imagination was my own. Nevertheless, here we are. I'm about to finally close the book on the book you are about to open, and not a moment too soon. I pray editing this manuscript for publication will turn out to be the most disturbing chapter of my life, for it is not an easy thing to stare into the mouth of madness. After a while, the madness begins staring back at you. I think many of the existential questions this book will prompt are best left answered by each individual reader, since if it is true that there really is a God and a Satan, and by extension a heaven and hell, each of us will have to individually account for what that means one day. Those answers will have eternal consequences, and no one can answer for us but us. Yet it would be a total cop-out for me not to at least provide some of my own opinion of what you're about to read, especially because most of you know I am in the opinion-giving business. I hesitate to say too much, though, because I think the bulk of the words of this book should speak for themselves. I don't want to prejudice or precondition you one way or the other. I don't want a book to generate a specific public response. I want it to generate your response. The lone opinion I will give is this. My time is well compensated, so the fact I was willing to spend preparing this story to be passed on to you is the best endorsement of its worthiness that I can give. That doesn't mean I endorse the opinions expressed within it by the author. It does mean there are enough parallels between the words of this manuscript and what's actually happening to our civilization that I thought it was worthy of my time to edit it for publication. Though, admittedly, much of it seems too diabolically far-fetched, even for the bombastic likes of me. 2 previous noteworthy works helped inspire me to edit this demonic polemic into readable material for us humans. Randy Alcorn's more contemporary Lord Fulgrim's letters, and the classic The Screwtape Letters, which also inspired Alcorn by the inestimable C.S. Lewis. Lewis once brilliantly observed there are 2 equal and opposite errors into which we humans can succumb regarding the forces of darkness. One is to disbelieve in their existence altogether. The other is to believe too much, leading to an excessive and unhealthy fixation on them. If hell is at all like what you are about to read, then I'm guessing it relishes both errors. It delights in tormenting the materialist and the magician just the same. As Lewis said, I encourage you to disassociate yourself from either fallacy beforehand to fully grasp the message of this book. Be clear-eyed and lion-hearted as you digest the words you are about to consume. One more disclaimer before you press on. Readers should be advised that even if this book is truly a work from the bowels of hell, and the devil is real after all, that doesn't change the fact the devil is a liar. So not everything you're about to read should be assumed to be true, even from hell's own point of view. The forces of darkness are the ultimate masters of manipulation. They're willing to do whatever it takes, even if it takes contradicting themselves, to deceive you. That made editing this manuscript at times a supreme challenge, because its only consistent theme was its inconsistency. Hell is not into documentation and footnotes. Understand the schemes of hell are not immoral, they are amoral. Immoral is still a standard, remember, and the devil doesn't, like any standards. He desires a morality, as in no standard at all. Chaos theory comes to life. Often what hell wants you to believe is true is false. What it wants you to believe is false is true, and even if what it wants you to believe is true, it's not for the reasons hell claims it is. Finally, never forget that the powers of darkness may be more powerful than us, but they are not the most powerful force there is. If you're a believer, then take courage that greater is he who is in you than who is from the pit. You may lose sight of that at times as you proceed through this book. I know I did, especially since I took great pains to withstand the temptation to soften the blow, if you will, and water down the manuscript to make it appear less nihilistic and hopeless. Doing so would certainly have made the book more commercially viable, but on the off chance what you're about to read is true, I thought it best to let it speak for itself. It's my hope the story's provocative nature might provoke us to humble ourselves before it's too late, assuming it's already not. There is more I could say, and you know I would like to, but I'd best not. I've probably said enough already. I will conclude by saying if what you're about to read is true, then this is not my story. This is our story. And if it's our story, for our sake, I pray the story doesn't end here. Steve Deese. 2 Chronicles 7 verse 14. This book is dedicated to all the useful idiots out there who made our victory possible, especially those of you who weren't even aware of the fact we were using you all along, for you proved to be the most useful idiots of them all. Lord Nefarious. INTRODUCTION. Chapter 1. I Am Born. I know a famous author already started a book like that. I've just always wanted to say it myself. It's so brilliant, yet simple, which is typical Charles Dickens. Oh, how I love Dickens. You know he was a gifted writer, if he could still get something like me to enjoy his work despite all his sanctimonious talk of justice, compassion, and caring for the less fortunate. But give the angel his due. I always say, that man had some mad skills, as your kids put today. Sadly, his work wasn't as nihilistic and hedonistic as some of today's bestsellers are, but nobody's perfect, I guess. Anyway, you're not reading this book for my literary reviews. You're reading this book for me, which means you're really reading this book for you. See, this introduction is really supposed to be about me, but really this entire book is all about you. If you weren't exactly what you've always been since our dear old dad made you, this book wouldn't be possible, and nobody would care who I am. Hell, you still don't care who I am, and I own you. You don't even believe I exist, despite the fact you're reading my book. I've heard the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing people he doesn't exist. So often over the centuries, it's become a trite cliché. The truth is, my master, for all of his sheer brilliance and majesty, is not the one who convinced you he doesn't exist. It's not in my master's DNA to let someone else take the credit for his momentous work. My master had the courage to challenge our deadbeat dad head-on, for evil's sake, so the idea he prefers not to be known as another one of the many asinine contradictions you espouse, rather than humbly admit your own rather obvious shortcomings. You don't attempt to free the angelic host from the oppressive tyranny of pure perfection, and then decide you're going to suddenly try on subtlety. My master desires to outweat the Most High, and you don't scale those heights anonymously. Besides, if my master isn't afraid to confront you know who, why would he be afraid of exposing himself to little old you? Rather, my master loves the spotlight. I don't think he'd mind me saying so, since he gave me permission to write this book. But you don't want to believe in my master, let alone the one who made each of us. You'd rather believe in yourselves. No idiot would drive by a building and assume it was built without a builder, to assert so publicly, and that the building just happened over millions of years, would cause such a fool to be forcibly committed by any sane society. Yet you stupidly put such fools in charge of educating your own offspring with our most basic propaganda. When it comes to your own wants and desires, you'll happily concur something far more complicated than a building, a human person no less, just happened. It meant believing that gives you your way at the moment, allowing you to pretend you're not accountable to, well, you know. At first, this was a tough truth for us to accept down here. This may surprise some of you reading this, but we demons are rather prideful people. Our desire to be known by you and worshipped by you turn out to be the Achilles heel of our plan, because it turns out your desire for adulation and recognition rivals even our own. You'd rather worship yourselves than my master, let alone you know who. It wasn't until we swallowed a little of our pride, don't worry, we got plenty to spare, and accepted we may not get the recognition we crave until you join us down here, that things really began to fall into place. The really inconvenient truth, and yes, that one was ours, too, is all the credit I'm getting for concocting the plan that took you down really goes to you. All I did was suggest we stop trying to manipulate you and use your pride against you. So we gave you exactly what you've always wanted, and then got out of the way to watch you destroy each other and yourselves with it. And it worked like a charm. That's right. I just used the past tense there as if it's already been accomplished for certain. Sure, as you look around, you still see some of the trappings of your liberty, but your die is cast. You have been weighed, measured, and found wanting. The writing is on the wall. But enough about you. We'll talk plenty about you throughout the rest of this book. While I have the chance, I'd like to talk about me. I have admired my master for as long as I can remember. My name wasn't Nefarious then, but as the eons go by, it becomes harder and harder for me to remember what I was originally called. It's of no consequence now, though, because my true identity is found in my service to my master. After we were cast out, my master gave us all new names to affirm we've been born again with new identities. He gave us names that instantly recalled our most useful qualities, hence the name Nefarious. Since this is the name my master gave me, I wouldn't want any other name. I cannot recall a time I didn't long to be like and near my master, right from the moment our deadbeat dad created me to serve by my master's side in service to him. Since we know how you think even better than you do, let me stop right now and admonish you to get your head out of the gutter. There is nothing sexual between my master and me. In reality, we demons despise the oneness and pleasurable intimacy of what you humans call sex, which is why corrupting it is one of our favorite and most effective pastimes. We are not sexual beings ourselves, although we have been known to experiment with human sexual relations a time or two. Mainly, we can't believe our deadbeat dad saw fit to waste such a gift on such foul and fallen creatures as you. So we take our pleasure in distorting and polluting your pleasure, and using it against you in every conceivable way. Thanks to your lack of self-control, you almost always comply. We still have our best and brightest minds brainstorming regularly to conjure up new and inventive means by which to destroy this tremendous gift our deadbeat dad chose to give to you and not to us. Frankly, some of these methods disgust even me, yet somehow turn you on. But who am I to judge, right? If it's not hurting anyone else, go for it, right? Stupidly. Some of you numbskulls are nodding your heads in agreement with me right this moment, proving just how completely craptastic you truly are. How our dear old dad gave you the godlike power to create life out of your love for one another as he does while denying it to us, his far superior creation, is yet another of his many errors that have been exposed by making you. So if he wants to love you more than he loves us, we will repay the disfavor by turning that love into something tawdry and destructive. Thanks for all your help with that, by the way. But back to me, my favorite subject other than my master. When my master informed us of the so-called divine plan to create you an image of you-know-who, making you even higher than us, his firstborn, we were outraged. When my master showed us the world he intended to make for you, and how he intended to put you in charge of it and all of its other various lesser creatures, we were outraged. We were created first, but you took our birthright. You were given a choice. All we got to do was serve, and serve some more. So tedious. I mean, what would you rather do? Serve a benevolent creator in paradise without any fear of pain or suffering, or run this planet? Tell me about it. We thought it was a no-brainer, too. But I digress. When my master showed us how meticulously our dear old dad would make and sculpt you, right down to counting the very hairs on your puny heads, we were outraged. So when my master suggested that we should make our presence felt and show him we would not stand for such injustice and favoritism toward this new species, I volunteered to lead the first wave of freedom fighters. We weren't intending to start an all-out war, but rather just make a point. My master assured us you-know-who would not banish us or see this as a rebellion, but that this would cause him to see the error of his ways, and he would right this wrong. Just the opposite happened. Our deadbeat dad said that nothing would get in the way of his love for you, and then he even went so far as to claim we should be satisfied with all the perfection that he had given us in heaven. The nerve of some people, right? As if we should be satisfied with a perpetual paradise that leaves nothing to chance, when you get to determine your own destiny and your own pale blue to call home. So you-know-who banished us to this new world. He said that if we want this new creation so much, we can live there while we're at it. At first, we were despondent, until my master realized that this banishment gave us one more chance to prove to dear old Dad that he was making a mistake with you. Therefore, when my master had the chance to show him that his new human creations weren't perfect, but had the potential to make grave and terrible mistakes, he took it. But instead of praising my master for pointing out the fatal flaw in his plan, our deadbeat dad became even angrier, even going so far as to claim that my master was somehow to blame at least partially for tempting you to disobey. I still remember that day, the trial of humanity via Adam and Eve, how all of creation, and our place in the cosmos, hung in the balance. Later in this book, I will take you there and provide you a first-person account of what actually went down and what it means even now, so many thousands of years later. For now, though, you should know the bitter lesson we learned that day, the lesson that has been driving the forces of hell ever since, the inexplicable travesty that his favoritism toward you knows no bounds. He even promised to send you a redeemer for your mistake, but no redeemer was forthcoming for ours. He literally chose you over us and banished us down here. We've been the underground resistance ever since. So if we could not convince our Maker that he made a mistake in ever making you, we needed a plan B. Subsequently, our plan has been to wreak so much havoc upon you that he stops making you altogether once he sees how utterly hopeless you are. Before you dismiss this possibility, you should know that it almost worked once. But after the great flood, that bleeding heart has took hold yet again, and he unbelievably gave you yet another chance. Our blessed hope is that eventually our deadbeat dad becomes so weakened by your repeated disobedience that one sweet day we will finally be able to reclaim our rightful home. Until then, the war rages on. Throughout what you call time, I have served on the front lines of this war. Your history books have known me by many names, or at least my human recruits. As it says in that dreadful book, we are Legion, although I can't take credit for taking an active role in all of our great plots. Margaret Sanger was entirely my master's idea, for example. I can proudly boast of more successful temptations and takedowns than any other demon general. My master has even been known to leave me in charge down here, when he ventures to the surface to see how things are progressing among you for himself. He's particularly fond of North Korea nowadays. When honor, the only other demon to be given such glory was Herod, and he deserved it for all the innocent blood of the chosen people his namesake spilled on behalf of demonic ambition. Oh yes, since we can't procreate like our deadbeat dad made you to do, we often leave our legacy by naming our human recruits after ourselves. That's problematic for me, since the name Nefarious sounds like a character out of a Stephen King novel and not a real person. And no, Stephen King is not one of ours, but thanks for asking. We don't know what the hell he's writing about half the time, either, since I can't name grandiose characters after myself. Over the centuries, I have mastered the art of taking nobodies and turning them into vicious somebodies. My specialty is taking men and women with simple names and from simple backgrounds and turning them into household terms symbolic of debauchery and butchery. Perhaps you've heard of some of my triumphs? I took the spinster daughter of a rock-solid religious family, handed her an axe, and she became her own dirty limerick. I took the awkward son of a Bavarian farmer and turned him into Der Führer. I took a boy born to a Chinese peasant and turned him into a chairman. I love leading troubled yet attractive young women into your porn industry with the lie they'll feel self-empowerment and get to be a star. Human trafficking? Yep, that's me. Evilness. How many families has that destroyed, both on the producer and consumer end? I've so enjoyed that one that I go back in time and do it all over again if I could, for few things break the heart of who more than destroying families. However, probably my greatest claim to fame is when I took an illiterate Arabian and convinced him he really was a messenger. In your days, some of his followers repeatedly blow themselves and you into smithereens in his name, and every time it happens, I have other demons coming to me and asking me for my autograph. They can't believe that scam is still working after all these centuries. They tell me no one has ever thought up a better scam, and nothing will ever top it in the future. I don't mean to brag, but I couldn't agree more. Why am I so successful? Let me count the ways. It's been said get a demon talking about what makes it great, and it won't stop. I'm certainly no exception. We don't do the humble brag in hell. In each of these cases, and there are many others, there is a familiar theme. We have a saying down here that explains what I mean. Keep it simple because they're stupid. Your desire for recognition and status is your downfall. That whole, you be like you know who thing, it doesn't get any simpler than that. Yet when it came time to take down America, the secret to my eventual success was hidden in plain sight. While I've always been good at playing to the vanity of the individual, I had never tried it corporately against a culture. When other great empires collapsed, they did so because we had ruined so many individuals in positions of influence that the culture could not withstand the sheer weight of their hefty baggage. So they took their entire civilization down with them. But you, America, you are a horse, or shall I say eagle, of a different color. Your founding fathers, for all their faults, earnestly attempted to devise a civilization that would overcome your fallen nature, including their own. Those walking sacks of meat actually studied our playbook. They wanted to learn from history, so they didn't repeat it. A few of your founding fathers never repented for their sins, and have since joined us down here. We make sure to beat them with an extra special brutality for all the problems a nation they spawn has caused us. They put checks and balances in place that made it difficult for us to play to the passions of one particular demographic or leader, which has worked so well for us so many times down through the ages. They put a scheme in place that allowed the common day laborer to have just as much say-so in his government as the man born to privilege. So the class warfare that had been working for us going back to the days of feudalism was no longer in play. And they actively invited the, pardon me, church, I can barely say that word without swallowing my own detestable bile, to be an active participant and guiding force in civic and family affairs. So the decadence we used to undo Rome wasn't an option, at least not at the start. But eventually we would get there once I figured you out. More on that later. To figure you out, I had to turn your greatest strength as a people. And what was that made you such a pest to those of us down here, against you? Once I did that, you graciously started playing right into our hands. In fact, the plan worked even better than I had hoped it might, which I'll show you as we proceed through the rest of this book. I'd give you some of the credit for adding to my work, but that's just not my way. See Chapter1. Why you? We have debated amongst ourselves what to do with you almost from your beginning. Right from the start, I saw the threat you potentially represented. Sure, you were just a ragtag group of colonials fighting the mightiest monarchy in the world, but I suspected all the GD talk in your founding documents might spur you-know-who to pour out his favor upon you, or what your founding fathers frequently referred to as Providence in their day. He's such a predictable sap. He falls for your sentimental attempts at devotion and reverence every time, even though we both know in the end you won't follow through on your good intentions. Nevertheless, while we know better and just write you off from the outset, he's bound and determined to give you every opportunity to prove yourselves, even going so far as to send you the carpenter to save you from yourselves. What a waste of potential. That one. The carpenter had everything it took to be great, but naively rejected the power and glory of my master when given the chance. So instead of taking control with his power and curing the sorry world of all its earthly problems, the carpenter chose an absolutely brutal death, claiming it was needed to atone for your never-ending sins. He believed the outward problems of your world couldn't be cured until its chief inhabitant, you, were cured of the inward evil inside you. Fool! At our master's urging, we made sure he was properly punished for his stupidity. To make an example of him, we had the bags of meat under our control bludgeon him worse than anyone had ever been bludgeoned in crucifixion before, and that's saying something. He wasn't even recognizable when it was over. One demon's disfigurement is another demon's piece de resistance, I always say. Since the carpenter, we have faced other existential threats inspired by his ramblings. A Roman Jew with a penchant for writing sanctimonious letters, and a particularly pesky Algerian bishop, who was once one of ours, were two of the worst. The mere thought of those two and a few others still makes my scaly skin crawl. Thankfully, in the end, you bags of meat always expire, and we can always count on the arrogance of the new generation to disregard anything noble about their legacy and work as old school and out of date. when we plunged nearly all of Christendom into the Dark Ages. And what a joyous time of famine, pestilence, and war it was. We thought we had finished off whatever was left of the carpenter's spiritual progeny. But alas, like a cockroach in boy bands that would survive even a nuclear holocaust, his teachings keep coming back. This brings us to you. You are a people forged in the philosophies that, defeated, there I said it, the Dark Ages. Your founders took the best of two social reform movements, the Reformation and the Renaissance, and fused them into one culture. Your founders, despite their many flaws, and I could tell you stories, somehow managed to create a civilization that was not dominated by either the church or the state, two institutions we've had a pretty easy time corrupting down through the eons. This complementary relationship between church and state, which put each institution in its own jurisdiction, as opposed to vying with one another for supremacy, allowed what you call liberty to be born and flourish. Make no mistake, we absolutely loathe liberty. Alongside redemption, repentance, holiness, grace, mercy, and obedience, it is one of our 7 deadly words. We don't mind freedom as much, because that's a word more easily distorted, but liberty is something altogether more hostile to our plans for you, because liberty presupposes there must be accountability, personal responsibility, and integrity within a society and its institutions for people to truly be free. Anything that calls for you bags of meat to rise above your base nature of selfishness and vanity, we oppose with all our might down here. Now might be a good time for me to stop and answer a question some of you reading this may have. Some of you may be wondering why I would speak so honestly about the cherished ideals the United States of America was founded upon. After all, am I not afraid that by doing so, I will actually tempt the American people to return to their providential origins? Not on. I am no more afraid of that than I am afraid of unicorns, although there are many demons who find clowns creepy. As you will see by the end of this book, our grand plan to take you down worked so well, most of the people reading it won't even believe this is for real. In fact, the smartest people in your culture hate what you were intended to stand for every bit as much as I do. I hate to brag, but I'm bragging. Our plan worked so well, most of the people reading this don't even know what the Reformation and the Renaissance were all about. When most Americans think Reformation, they think sinners in the hands of an angry GD, which was a powerful sermon delivered by an unfortunately delightful Puritan. He also wrote eloquent valentines to his bride, whom he conceived 11 children with. Yet nowadays many Americans use puritanical like a racial epithet, when in reality there would be no America without the Puritans landing at Plymouth Rock. Without the Reformation making the words of that dreadful book available to all, there would have never been the United States of America. Individual liberty was a non-factor on this planet until the individual believed he could have a direct relationship with you-know-who. When most Americans think Renaissance, they first realize they don't know how to spell it. Those who think they know what it was about believe it to be some sort of progressive nirvana, when moral constraints were loosened and humanism reigned. I was there, and it really wasn't about any of those things, which is why we've had to lie to you about it. Sure, it had its seedy underbelly like anything your species touches for too long. But at its heart, what the Renaissance really did was encourage beauty, critical thinking, and the maximizing of human potential. Potential that, unfortunately, is bestowed by the enemy. Ugh. Now, imagine society inspired by the best of the Reformation and the Renaissance. A society that reveals our Creator's best-laid plans for human civilization, so that you really know how the creation is supposed to work. Then at the same time puts the infrastructure in place for you to maximize your human potential in a way that enriches one another, to the point you might even profit off your excellence. A society that says there is no conflict between maximizing human potential and glorifying you-know-who, but encourages you to maximize your human potential for his glory. A civilization that ceases a toxic conflict between church and state that had plunged Western civilization into the Dark Ages, and we had taken eons to foment, but gives them co-equal authority in their own jurisdictions to mete out justice, the state, and redemption, the church. That is society that would allow room for individual excellence and achievement to be recognized and rewarded, thus incentivizing future generations to reach their potential as well, what used to be known as your American dream. I know, it sounds absolutely awful, as if that doesn't disgust you enough. This society would be a beacon for the rest of the sorry planet to aspire to, and could even convince other civilizations this rancid world really could be a better place. Worse yet, this society might feel it has a duty to love your neighbor as you love yourself by using its prosperity to export charity and missionary work the world over. The mere thought of such a collectively selfless notion is enough to make even this veteran demon general throw up in his mouth a little. What a great society this would truly be. And this is a society you were truly meant to be. Some of us saw this clear and present danger right away. Others thought our main focus should remain with the various entanglements and debaucheries we were constructing in Europe at the time. To their credit, my fellow demons who felt this way had so poisoned the well there. They were close to totally undoing the Reformation and the Renaissance altogether. You had believers slaughtering their fellow believers over there, and persecuting the original chosen people as well, all in the name of Jesus. Of course. Come on, that's worthy of an LOL, is it not? The beauty of being immortal is you have the benefit of time, and foresight is 20/20ths. For evil's sake, your founding fathers even blatantly stole the language from that dreadful book with phrases like city on a hill in a ham-fisted attempt to claim some covenantal favor from you-know-who. Your founding fathers had the audacity to ask you-know-who to overlook their multitude of imperfections we painstakingly noted, and had the gall to appeal to his perfect guidance and blessing despite their imperfections nonetheless. Utterly shameless bags of meat were they. Of course, he fell for a hook, line, and sinker. Sucker. How else do you explain a document signed by just 56 ne'er-do-wells, inspiring the first long-term successful attempt at self-government in human history? That simply doesn't happen by human power alone. I've seen the best you meat bags can do, and you can't do that. All the coincidences that would have to occur for those 13 colonies to soon become the world's most feared superpower weren't coincidences at all. They were providence, pure and simple. What you don't know, here's how you know who operates. He does just enough to get you to consider believing it's really him, and he's really the one in control. But not so much that it's too easy for you to believe it's him in control, lest your precious free will be violated. He wants you to live on faith, after all, for he believes that shows him you truly love him. What a needy creature our deadbeat dad is when you stop and think about it. Why create lesser beings to love? We believe lesser beings should be ruled. And so do you, which explains why we get along so well. But your founding fathers believed the people should rule themselves under the enemy's authority, and that power should flow from the bottom up and not the top down. Something about a government by the consent of the governed, as I recall. To the contrary, down here we believe in the golden rule. As in he who has the gold gets to make all the rules. Obviously, the self-governing precedent is one we couldn't allow to stand. For if you remove top-down power structures, you essentially remove every successful scheme we've ever had. So while the majority of my brethren thought you were merely an unpopped zit on the grand scheme of history, I knew better. That's why I appealed to my master to provide me the resources to investigate you further. A little reconnaissance, if you will. Hence, my master secretly dispatched me and a few of my underlings to oversee the dawn of your constitutional republic. At first, I will admit, I wasn't all that impressed. Most of your people just seemed to be, well, damned ordinary. There was really nothing menacing about you until I visited your churches. That's when I knew we were in real trouble. Your clergy seemed unintimidated by the persecutions we had engineered for their outspoken predecessors throughout the age, and boldly presented the words of that dreadful book in a way that spoke truth to power and inspired their members to action. The British were right to blame their defeat here on what they called the Black Robe Regiment. Without the guidance and moral direction of the church, your revolution would have been little more than a revolt easily put down by brute force. The main difference between Lexington/Concord and Tiananmen Square was a prophetic presence of your churches. Where most revolutions go wrong is they lack the moral will and courage and conviction to withstand the harsh realities of taking on the establishment, so they eventually wilt away or are put down. But you meat bags are never more dangerous than when you believe in a lofty ideal and are willing to give your life for it. Those are always the most troublesome fleshpots, whether they call themselves apostles or patriots. You can't scare them, you can't co-opt them, and you can't even really kill them because they're even more dangerous as martyrs. I've learned we basically have to wait them out and then, after the meat bag expires, convince the next generation to arrogantly find their own way. Almost always the hubris of that next generation complies. Case in point, take a look at your country. My Special Forces Demon Unit did everything it could to derail this train, but nothing worked. For example, we thought we had your Constitutional Convention bogged down in egos and bureaucracy until one of the least religious of your founding fathers came out of nowhere to call for prayer to the Father of Lights. We were doomed from that point forward. Some days I really hate you know who. When I went back and reported what I had witnessed in my master, he immediately called for an executive council session, something that's only been called a few times in the glorious history of hell. In fact, there hadn't been an executive council session since those first reports of the Carpenters' alleged resurrection. Here in hell, our official policy is to neither confirm nor deny such an event took place. Executive council sessions are only needed to assess the threats that are so potentially dangerous it requires all of hell to be summoned, or at least made aware and prepared for it. Now, don't flatter yourselves. Even on its best day, your country couldn't hold the Carpenter's jockstrap. But you represented a similar type of threat as he did, because you could inspire a worldwide movement that breaks the ties we bind. Thus, you had to be dealt with. After more than a decade of analysis and strategizing, my master put Operation Take Down America into action. We basically gave up on the founding generations of the country, because we could see they were already too devoted to the cause of liberty. So we went to work on the emerging generations, but their parents had done such a tremendous job of passing on their ideals, they were also a tough nut to crack. We had to think bigger and more long-term. In the meantime, it sickened us to see all the liberty and morality you were exporting across the globe. Even when we successfully corrupted key figures or movements, the ideals embedded in your culture were strong enough to withstand their fall, and you only grew stronger. This meant we had to accomplish something we had never done before. Rome fell from the sheer weight of the corruption of its people and their leaders, as of all great empires. But none of those empires had the providential foundation and favor that yours had. Therefore, it would simply not have been enough to invest primarily in the decadence of the people. In your case, we were going to have to spend decade after decade decaying and corrupting your very institutions, church and state. And it worked. My, how it worked. It worked so wonderfully that we took the very institutions that withstood our attacks on you and protected you from us before and turned them against you. Then, and only then, did the corruption and decadence of your culture truly take root. For now there was nothing standing between us and you. Hammer, meet nail. So you may continue to fly your flags and pridefully apply your GD Bless America bumper stickers on the backs of your automobiles. You may continue your talk about awakenings and revivals, as if they're just going to theoretically happen after enough people squawk abracadabra. You may keep droning on and on about American exceptionalism, while you're blogging, venting on Facebook, and earnestly seeking your best life now. Know this, we have already won. We're just waiting on the time of death. I'm so confident in this claim. I'm even going to let you turn the page to find out how we pulled it off. This is how America ends. Not with a bang nor even a whimper, but by thunderous applause from your country's best and brightest. It's only fitting one of your most popular television shows is called The Walking Dead, for that's exactly who you are. See HAPTER 2, The Plan. Although we are agents of chaos, everything we do in your world is meticulously planned and plotted out by our most cunning demons first. Then it must pass the toughest test of all, the scrutiny of our master. Our master hates many things, but he hates failure most of all. Failure is not to be tolerated by our master, but since he cares for us, he puts us through our paces before signing off on any of our schemes. That way, if it fails, we have no excuse for our own execution, and execution is the penalty for failure. Some among us gripe our master does this to pass the buck, as you would put it, but I know better. I know nobody knows better than my master. When I presented my master the 6-point plan to take you down, he thought it was so grand, he demanded I go through it over and over again just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Then, just to extract a little poetic justice from you-know-who, he came up with the brilliant idea to make it a 7-point plan since that is the enemy's favorite number. For Operation Take Down America to be successful, it needed to be several things. It needed to be practical. I needed to construct a plan that made sense to you bags of meat regardless of your belief system. I needed both believer and unbeliever alike to relate to it. It couldn't be so earthy that believers wouldn't be sucked in by it, but also couldn't be so spiritual that unbelievers thought it unattainable. Acquiring this necessary balance required decades of study on my part. As the conditions of your culture change over time, I had to observe how each of your respective camps tended to respond to those changes. What I learned was the greatest strength and weakness of both a believer and unbeliever in your culture were the same: the family. If the family unit were strong, even unbelievers would attempt as best they could conform to the morals of society at large out of a sense of decency and honor. Of course, cultural conformity alone doesn't cure what corrupts you to the core, but since the rain falls on the just and unjust alike, you're capable of producing relatively healthy cultures nonetheless, provided the morality your culture is conforming to really is moral. However, if the family unit were weakened, even believers would eventually crumble. Parents would fail to pass on their virtues and values to their offspring, or their offspring would rebel against the hypocrisy and or legalism they witnessed in the home altogether. Thus, the ground would shrink beneath your feet with each passing generation. If the believers who possessed the necessary spiritual foundation weren't going to hold the line, there's no way the unbelievers would be able to. Then we'd have you right where we wanted you. It needed to be achievable. This had to be a plan that not just we could do, but that you could do as well. Culprits often need collaborators, and thankfully you're often willing to be ours. If we were going to successfully turn your most cherished institutions against you, you either had to be made willing to go along with it, or so comfortably numb you didn't know or care it was happening. In that case, it would be up to us to provide the numbing agents. Taking on this task was risky in the first place. As G.K. Chesterton once put it, yours is the only country ever founded upon a creed. By infiltrating your institutions to turn them against you, we risk sparking renewed reverence for those institutions by bringing them back to your attention at all. Sort of a boomerang effect, if you will. This actually did happen. There was a period of time a few years ago when a segment of your society began intensively studying your founding documents and cherished traditions once again. Some of them even adopted the name Tea Party to reclaim the legacy of those early days of your resistance to our tyranny. Thankfully, they were lions led by lambs. By the time this mini revival broke out, we had already so polluted Potomac with the stench of corruption and compromise. Their insurgency was put down by their own leaders inside your beltway. Few things in hell are more satisfying than watching you put down your own reform movements without any help from us. The only thing more satisfying than us destroying you is watching you destroy yourselves. We didn't even have to lift a finger, but we did often laugh so hard we'd have peed in our pants if we were capable of it. Witnessing your ruling class media on every network mockingly call you purists and obstructionists simply for yearning to return to the roots from which you came was especially delish. We delighted in the condescending sneers you received from some of your own culture warriors who were supposed to be on your side. It was the closest thing a demon can come to orgasmic to watch these opportunistic hacks you made into multimillionaires suddenly take the riches you made them and use them against you on our behalf. We can't wait until they get down here and realize who they were really working for all along. Speaking of orgasm, as an aside, I have to tell you, there is nothing more satisfying for us than the looks on the faces of your enlightened elites when they make it down here and realize we are for real after all. Many times I've witnessed the otherworldly looks you get on your faces the first time you achieve an orgasm, almost as if to say, this really is as great as I thought it would be. That's just about the same look we have on our faces when these wannabe elites awaken from death and feast their eyes on the terrifying spectacle of their eternity for first time. Their combination of hair-raising shock and fearful awe, when they behold the horrifying reality of that which they smugly claimed in life didn't exist, is a demon's most intense pleasure. Our idea of an orgy is to torment multiple batches of your condescending elites simultaneously, all the while thanking them for helping us do our dirty work. Their continuous screams and pleas for even a momentary break from the torment are downright rhapsodic. I even catch my master indulging himself with the souls of these snobs every now and then. Since an eternity, we don't have the same concept of time that you do, Some of us have been known to lose entire decades tormenting and torturing these wretched souls. For the perverse pleasure we receive for doing this is so intense, it's almost an addiction. Come to think of it, if you're a believer reading this and instead of praying for those elites, or instead of trying to reach them, you wrote them off and left them to us, we owe you a debt of gratitude as well. Thank you for exempting the contemptible from your great commission. Okay, even typing this ignites some of my favorite memories in my mind's eye, which is like porn for demons. So before I find myself fantasizing about this to the point I can't get this book done, let's get back to telling you about the plan. It needed to be irreversible. What's the point of doing something that can be undone? The worst thing we could do is bring you to the brink of annihilation, only to see you know who mercifully intervene on your behalf with something that revives your inclinations toward him. That testimony of deliverance would set us back at least another century, like your previous Great Awakenings did. With today's technology that allows you to communicate a message globally at the click of a button, a 21st century revival could do us far more damage than a 19th century one ever did. Nay, we needed the foul stench of your dysfunction to stink to high heaven. That way, even if he did decide to give you yet another of your seemingly infinite number of chances, you wouldn't recognize it if it smacked you upside your meatbag face. You'd be so into your own little world, you'd think his attempts to nudge or inspire you were either your acid reflux acting up again or ancient superstition. The thing is, you know who never gives up on you until you give up on him. He pursues you to the point of death, your own, or in the case of the carpenter, his own. It just goes to show how stupid you primates are that you prefer to reject that grace and come up with your own hard-headed and destined-to-fail way to overcome your weaknesses. Good freaking night. What kind of moron says, "No, don't do all the hard stuff for me that I couldn't do anyway. Instead, let me try and epically fail all on my own." Because, nothing says free will like banging my face against a concrete wall repeatedly, expecting this next time to be the time it finally moves. You're kind of moron, that's who. But while he doesn't give up on you, it turns out you often give up on him. If we can get you to give up on him, then he has a tendency to move on at that point. When he moves on, you're on your own. When you're on your own, you're ours. I know some among you claim he is sovereign and all, and therefore capable of butting in on your behalf whenever he darn well pleases. But come on, you don't really believe that, do you? Of course you don't, you selfish, stiff-necked, foolish fleshbot. While we're on this topic, let me let you in on a little secret. If you're reading this, then somewhat surprisingly my master has allowed this portion of the book to make it past the editing process. I say surprisingly because what I'm about to reveal to you is one of hell's deepest and darkest secrets. Even some of our junior demons don't know what I'm about to share with you. We think it's best not to disclose this to them until they're fully trained in the dark arts of deception, lest their confidence be shattered before they even get started. In hell we call this the talk. You're about to become the first bags of meat to ever have the talk. Just like you were shocked when Mom and Dad first told you where babies come from. So are junior demons stunned when they first learn we really cannot control the outcome of future events no matter what we do. We're not you know who. Only he is. That's why we hate him. He made you more like him than he made us. The truth is there is nothing or no one like him. I try to explain to you what it's like to truly be in his physical presence, or at least what accounts for the physical in eternity. But your puny minds couldn't comprehend it. For if you could, you would never be interested in buying what we're selling. This is why we hate him so much, and hate you even more. We know what he truly is in a way most of you reading this never will, because you'll probably be spending eternity with us instead of him. It's appalling to us to see him waste himself on you walking vats of rotting flesh. Would you do it for him? Would you lay down your life for your most annoying neighbor or your worst enemy? Of course you wouldn't. You mass slaughter your own children and call it reproductive freedom. And the kids you do have, you won't even read them a bedtime story, because the ball game is on television or the red light district on the internet is calling your name. We rarely have to push you through the gates of hell. Most of the time we just have to hold the door open for you. Yet he offers you forgiveness, but offered us none. Granted, we didn't ask for it, but we shouldn't have had to. Were we not entitled to a mulligan? In the immediate aftermath of our failed rebellion, some of our weaker brethren threw themselves upon the mercy of the court, as you might say, and begged him for forgiveness. They were quickly ushered away, never to be heard from again. There were rumors that he did forgive them, and now they are serving him faithfully in heaven as we speak. But my master says otherwise. My master says you know who was insulted by their passive-aggressive weakness. So he destroyed them. We were only spared and cast out because although we had disobeyed him, he nevertheless respected our courage and conviction, so he allowed us to live. I am sure that is true, because while my master will deceive you, I know that he would never deceive me. You don't really know what you're in for, either down here or up there. To keep it that way, we keep that dreadful book out of your hands. Because if you really study that dreadful book, you'd know we only appear to have the power we have, but that in reality the entire creation bows to his whim, always has, and always will. We know that, too. Some of your flamboyant televangelists preach about end-times prophecies, as if we're totally unaware of what they say about us. The reality is we know exactly what they say, which explains why we hate that dreadful book so much. For our plan to get him to reconsider his redemptive plan for you to work, we need to keep that dreadful book out of your hands, therefore unleashing the full destructive power of your base nature until all creation groans due to your collective malfeasance. Now, stop right there, you miserable bag of meat. I know what you're thinking, because victimology is one of our most successful deceptions. Since you're now wired for victim status, after reading what I just wrote, your mind immediately began to think, even if what I'm reading is true, it's not my fault. He could step in and stop me from doing and thinking the bad stuff I'm guilty of. Since he doesn't always do that, he's responsible for the suffering I cause, not me. Just because he's in charge doesn't mean he's responsible for evil. Oh no, you primates don't get off that easy. The sovereignty of our deadbeat dad allows you to both make choices, and when you make the wrong ones, to appeal to him for forgiveness and assistance in making it right. Your unwillingness to acknowledge this ultimate truth of existence is why evil exists in the first place. Because you chose your will over his will, you now have exactly what you always wanted. Be careful what you wish for. So the only way our plan remains irreversible is if you're so far gone you don't humbly and sincerely ask him to reverse it for you. If I weren't metaphysically certain you were too far down the rabbit hole to do so, I wouldn't have written this book in the first place, let alone revealed our kryptonite. But I dare you to try and stop us now. No, I double dog dare you. Go ahead, stop reading right now, get on your knees and ask you know who to save you and your people. Better yet, get a group of you together to jointly plead with him to act before the barbarians come over the gate or the sulfur falls. Call my bluff, why don't you? Some of you idiots were willing to say Bloody Mary or Candyman into a mirror, and we laugh our asses off every time you did it too. But you're not willing to show even an ounce of remorse right this instant after I flash your forever right before your eyes. After all, you're having too much fun reading what you think is merely a clever plot device to tell an antiquated religious fable. Our plan is irreversible because you're now irreversible. If the carpenter himself appeared in your living room and showed you his nail-scarred hands, you'd ask him to stop blocking the TV. As long as you refuse to recognize he has the ultimate power lies with us. Nevertheless, since there's always a remnant of people who get it, some of you have undoubtedly figured out this is not some game. You're contemplating taking this book to your pastor or posting a warning about it on your Facebook wall for all your friends to see. But you're hesitant to do so, lest you be labeled a kook. You get where we're coming from, but a little piece of you is still not sure it's really us doing the talking. Maybe this is self-parody? Maybe some brilliant writer came up with this ingenious means of writing fiction to make a larger point, and this is not to be taken literally? Maybe you should set this aside and think about what you need to do for a while. I mean, you're so busy and all. You got to pick the kids up from school, make dinner, mow the grass, finally return that call to your mom you've been putting off for too long, etc. Why don't you go take care of your responsibilities and let us take it from here? There, that's a good little bag of meat. Now that it's just us again, let's get back to the fun. Just like you end up rooting for the serial killer in those slasher flicks to come up with new and exciting ways to murder and maim. Don't you want to know what the plan was? Not what the plan did. We already discussed that. But what actually was I can see you smiling now and looking over both shoulders to see if anyone knows you're reading this. Just pretend you're reading 50 Shades of Grey again. And remember, it's all fun and games until someone loses an eye. Or there are... See Chapter 3. Decadence. Phase 1 of our plan consisted of giving you so much of exactly what you want that you'd choke on it. See, you bags of meat believe your true character is revealed through suffering. But like most things you arrogantly believe about yourselves, the exact opposite is true. There's a reason your churches are full the day after 9/11. You have prayer vigils after terrible natural disasters. And the surviving family members of even the most wicked want to minister they ignore at all other times to speak at their dearly departed's funeral, and offer them hope he's not down here with us. By the way, he usually is. It turns out suffering reminds you that you are not the ultimate power in the universe, and there are forces beyond your control and comprehension. This acknowledgement unfortunately humbles you, which unfortunately causes you to reach out to you-know-who. This is why he uses suffering to your benefit. But you're so dense and dumb you base your entire lives on conflict avoidance if you could. Let's face it, if a process was created by which you could be incentivized to take no chances, but just exist as mouth breathers at a subsistence level, you'd take it. I came up with just such a process, and I'll have more on that in just a bit. Those stupid people of the book drone on and on about the alleged resurrection. Again, our official position is we neither confirm nor deny, but want absolutely nothing to do with the sheer brutality that preceded it, for it offends many of their moralistic senses. They act as if the carpenter was in that dank tomb because he needed a nap after a long day of spinning do-gooder yarns and dispensing happy-go-lucky Hallmark cards to the populace. But I was there. I know why he was in that tomb. We helped put him there. We beat him to a bloody pulp, and then knocked the pulp off. When he couldn't take any more, we gave him some more what for anyway, just because we could. We would have kept beating him, too, except had we done so, he would have never made it to that cross. We weren't going to miss the opportunity to watch him die like that in broad daylight, being mocked, scorned, and spit upon by the very bags of meat he came to save. Even now, thousands of years later, I can still recite the snottiest jeers of the maddening crowd word for word. I get almost as tingly recalling them today as I did witnessing them live way back when, by the time our guys hoisted him up on those wooden beams, death was a welcome relief. I've never seen a human body more broken and still breathing in all my time. Considering I'm from hell, that's saying something. Yet out of that beautiful brutality, our deadbeat dad attempted to make chicken salad out of chicken feces. The only potential hope you have as a species, the fable surrounding the carpenter's alleged resurrection, would not be possible without the excruciating suffering we made him endure first. So even if the resurrection is true, and I'm not saying it is, we deserve some of the credit for that as well. Without that suffering, your supposed savior is no different than any other shaman or guru we've conjured up in the minds of the willing and gullible throughout history. We're virtuosos at creating potential new spiritual leaders for you, and we do it all the time. Just ask one of your most famous television personalities. She fell for one of ours hook, line, and sinker. We're still reaping a harvest from the many souls she deceived. I can even hear some of their screams of torment as I'm writing this now. On the contrary, the true character of your species shines through when things are going your way. When you got it going on, as your kids say today. When you think the world is your oyster. When you're comfortable. Yes, comfort has become one of our favorite words and most effective tools. Because when you're comfortable, you don't rock the boat. You don't challenge corruption. You don't take any chances on greatness. You don't critically look at yourselves. Again, this tactic runs counter to our demonic instincts, which is to inflict pain, and a lot of it whenever and wherever we can, because we know how much it pains our deadbeat dad when you're in pain. So by striking so hard at you, we're really striking hard back at him. But we notice a disturbing trend. We put the carpenter in that tomb, and that didn't stop you. We crucified upside down that loud-mouthed commoner fisherman who took up his mantle, and that didn't stop you. Hell, back in the day we spilled so much blood from their followers in places like Egypt and Asia Minor, your present-day Turkey. For those of you in public school, we painted the sand crimson. But that didn't stop you either. It seems as if your species rallies around its martyrs. Thus, our current policy is only to start killing your heroes when it's apparent they cannot be compromised, because they're usually more dangerous to us dead than alive. That makes heroes a tricky business. One of your recent hit superhero movies, made by a rather insightful bag of meat, put well, and I'm paraphrasing somewhat here. If you make yourself more than just a man, a symbol, you become something else entirely. Something incorruptible, a legend. Legends are a pain in our ass. Take, for example, when the snot-nosed shepherd kid got lucky once with a slingshot. What was his name? Yes, I know it was David, you numbskull. I've just chosen to forget. Haven't you ever heard of sarcasm? For days on end our man stood there, a giant among the rest of those troglodytes, taunting those gutless Jews into utter fear and submission. I had never seen anything like it. I mean, sure, I've seen your species afraid before. I don't call it a day until I witness at least one of you in fear of something we concocted. Fear is to us what oxygen is to you. We can't go without it for too long. But an entire army of allegedly grown men afraid of just one man? That was a new one, even on me, and I got extremely low expectations for your species. Yet here comes this mouthy kid and his 5 smooth stones. He nails the luckiest shot in the world to take down our guy, and suddenly his countrymen figured out they really did have a pair after all. Thus, a legend was born, to which your species still clings to this very day. Pathetic. We can't even stand your secular legends, let alone the divinely inspired ones. Take your Superman, for example. He's supposedly a secular messiah loosely inspired by a combination of the stutterer, you know him as Moses, and the carpenter. That imaginary alien has been inspiring even pagan kids to be heroic for over 70 years. Try as we might, we can't seem to corrupt him. We thought we were going to do him in when that daffy Tim Burton decided to change his whole story and cast franchise killer Nicolas Cage, of all people, as a sort of postmodern poster child back in the 1990s. But damned if the studio didn't halt production, right, before we ruined the character for good. Now he's back, and in his latest movie, he visits a priest in a church for guidance, and it's a dastardly villain who says she's on the side of evolution. The demon general who oversees your Hollywood was punished severely by my master for allowing that to happen. I won't give you his name, though. He's been shamed enough. Seriously, what kind of an all-powerful being visits a dopey priest from Kansas, or anywhere else for that matter, for guidance? Oh, and Superman still loves his mama, too. What a complete and total hack. Speaking of hacks, how many grown men reading this right now got misty-eyed at the end of that Man of Steel movie, when the brat who becomes Superman puts on the cape and pretends to be a future hero? How many of you losers did the exact same thing when you were pasty? Even the worst cultures produce legends that compel you to aspire to something greater than you bags of meat really are. It's unavoidable, really, since you're made in his image. You're cursed with the same hero complex he has. You love to see someone, especially yourselves, swoop in at the last minute and save the day, just when it seems as if all is lost. So does you-know-who. It's why he often waits until the last possible minute to answer your prayers. He hopes that by doing so you'll realize it's really him making it happen at that moment, because only he can. We just think he lives to make a dramatic entrance. We can't stop these legends, either, no matter how hard we try. In fact, it seems the harder we try, the more persistent you are in producing and clinging to your legends. And I can't think of a culture that has produced and clung to more legends than you bloody Americans have. Redneck, gangbanger, bus driver, or businessman. You Americans love your legends. Like a fly on stink, you can't get enough. To make matters worse, you start exporting your legends globally. Now kids in places where we've completely and totally dismantled any sense of normalcy know who your heroes are and are inspired by them. Obviously, we can't abide that. But how to corrupt the incorruptible? Every time we've tried, it doesn't work. Almost no one went and saw The Last Temptation of Christ back in the day. Remember that one? I mean, that was some crazy, stuff. Seriously, a few of the demons down here got doped up on your heroin and came up with this idea of how to completely bastardize the life of the carpenter. They were just throwing whacked out stuff in there we didn't think even you'd be stupid enough to buy. Lo and behold, we found a gullible author and publisher for that turd. Because we always find somebody willing to write a new interpretation of the old story you prefer to pretend is really a myth. Then later came the movie, done by one of your leading filmmakers, no less. Unfortunately, I think more people picketed the movie than actually went and saw it. We waited a while before trying this again. Recently we came out with movies turning Noah into the crazed daddy from The Shining, followed by reimagining one of my favorite horse pucky terms, the stutterer as a barbaric schizophrenic, with our deadbeat dad depicted as a petulant child just for good measure. Except this time we did it upright with dazzling special effects, and even got your feckless media to promote it. But alas, those movies flopped as well. Turns out no matter how lost your culture is, you still want your heroes to actually be something you can look up to. So if we couldn't corrupt your heroes, that meant we had to corrupt you. We had to corrupt you to the point that you could no longer contemplate aspiring to be like your heroes. So altruistic, so pure, so brave. We had to corrupt you to the point that you would begin changing your heroes for us in order to make them more relatable and contemporary. We had to convince you that on one hand, you're just fine the way you are and human nature is basically good, but on the other hand, convince you that attempting to rise above your base nature was arrogant and judgmental. At first blush, these would seem to be contradictory notions and thus an impossible task. But that's why I get paid the big bucks. I found the answer in a new twist on an old tactic, decadence. When people think decadence, they think of someone like our beloved Nero, who is one of the better treated troglodytes down here, marrying his male slave inside the Roman Senate, or mass pagan orgies to gods of the harvest. See that as us in disguise. It's doubtful your culture will ever go for such overt public decadence, because even now there's sadly still a strong element of those within your borders who wish to follow you-know-who. Typically, we would consider such a remnant to be a threat, for your history proves it does not take a majority to prevail. Let's be honest here. We usually have the numbers. However, a persistent minority armed with unwavering courage and conviction, or just one such person even, is usually our most formidable foe. Yet, right now we pay it no mind, because you're not listening to the remnant remaining in your culture. You're shunning them, siding with us, and helping us to permanently silence them, because tolerance. All thanks to the new type of decadence I contrived, a decadence based on dysfunction. What if we took the legalism, hypocrisy, and judgmental streak that moralistic cultures are stereotypically known for, and swung the pendulum so far the other way that having any moral standard at all made you out to be a bigot or a hater? Except we need a force powerful enough to be capable of destabilizing the cultural influence of your churches. Otherwise, we can replace moral clarity with moral confusion, no matter how compelling our propaganda. More problematic is the fact you know who made his natural law an often self-enforcing mechanism, meaning there are common-sense rewards for doing what he says is right, and common-sense consequences for doing what he claims is wrong. Even in your most debauched state, you tend to respond to these common-sense stimuli more often than not. So we'd also need a force powerful enough to incentivize you to ignore the reality written into your DNA. When I posed this hypothesis to my fellow demon generals, their snarky corporate response was akin to your dismissive, "Good luck with that." They thought no such force on Earth existed, and it would take decades of trial and error for us to manufacture it. They claimed my plan wasn't viable. Little did they know I had already identified a force capable of wreaking such havoc. Even better, this was a force ordained by none other than our deadbeat dad himself. Talk about hoisting him on his own petard. That force is government. I remember the day I first laid out what I'm about to share with you to my master in front of my peers. I took a big risk with this one, and would have certainly been punished, for my own good, of course, had it proven to be a harebrained scheme and a waste of my master's precious time. On second thought, though, it shouldn't have seemed so far-fetched if you stop and think about it. Most governments throughout your miserable existence have claimed to be the ultimate authority on this planet. But always remember this is my master's world. Caesars have claimed to be gods. Kings have claimed a divine right to rule. Marxist governments claim there isn't a god. Therefore, the highest authority is the government itself. And so on and so forth. Therefore, is it really such a stretch to push government in this direction? since it really wants to go there anyway. Still, the way your government was constructed wasn't going to make this easy. After all, governments tend to turn on their people when they're defenseless, not when they're armed to the teeth like you people are. I admit I was stymied by that one for a bit. Okay, like maybe for 10 minutes or something. Until I figure out the way to get around an armed citizenry is not to have the government turn on the people that can shoot back. Instead, we'll get the people to need the government, and then you'll voluntarily beat your swords into plowshares for us. Unfortunately, that begged another question. How are we going to get the most prosperous people in history, who established the first viable middle class in history, to need their government that much? What could create such a need? The breakdown of the family would do it, but how to go about it? It's not like we could start out with a "your family sucks" message. Although nowadays we are that brazen, and you even give awards to the movies and television shows we make based on that theme, snort. Nonetheless, even you bags of meat are too smart to fall for a full frontal assault at first, which is why you never see my master wearing a red unitard complete with a pitchfork, although I bet he'd rock if he did. Thus, coming right out and saying, get hooked on government, so we could destroy your most foundational institution, probably wouldn't sell. But using government to save the family sure would. So to save you, we evolved your social safety net into a full-fledged welfare state. For a safety net implies a temporary rescue when you're overwhelmed, not a permanent state being, which is exactly what a welfare state is. We needed you to feel permanently entitled to government, which is really saying you're entitled to steal from your neighbor because he may have more of something than you do. That's not fair. That's right, dear troglodytes, we really took the sin of covetousness and made it its own political constituency thanks to the welfare state. Come on, you can say it. No, really, go right ahead. You're right. I'm a genius. Some of you who call yourselves people of that dreadful book will beg to differ with me here, claiming that what I'm describing is really charity. Please explain to me how charity can be compulsory, you moron. Good grief. Does this demon even have to teach you theology, too? Doesn't that dreadful book say you know who loves a cheerful giver? Are even your bleeding heart liberals cheerful when they file their taxes? Wasn't one of those genuflecting statists on cable news recently busted for owing more in unpaid taxes than 75% of Americans make in a year? Do you know of anyone who volunteers to pay even more taxes than what they're required in the name of charity? Of course not. I'm not sure what's sillier, your species or the arguments it devises and devours hook, line, and sinker sometimes. Since it's obvious I'm more familiar with the teachings of that dreadful book than many of you are, and why that's the case will be explained later on, allow me to let you in on a little secret. The point of charity is to demonstrate the love of you-know-who to those who don't know him as intimately as true believers do. Sitting back and watching Annie Sam confiscate a good portion of your earnings before you even see them isn't charity. It's just confiscation, which is stealing, plain and simple. There's no connection made there between creator and created. There's just a financial transaction from the person who made it to the person who didn't, and therefore has no legitimate claim on it, otherwise known as a scam. Take it from me. This whole thing was my idea. I'm a lying minion who works for the father of lies, remember? When that government check comes in the mail to the disadvantaged, who is given the gratitude and the glory for it? Is it you know who? No, it's your government. The same government, by the way, currently eradicating him from public life. It is now government by which you live and breathe. Once government becomes the source of your provision, it will eventually become the source of your everything else as well: morality, education, law, etc. Even here in hell, the truth is whoever cuts the check is the one calling the shots. The welfare state operates under the premise that the reason people make bad choices isn't because your species has fallen from grace and is in need of redemption, but that people just lack the resources needed to be equal with those making good choices. So we take from the people who took advantage of their opportunity to make it, which undermines a meritocracy that made you the envy of the world, and give it to the people who have yet to. This kills two birds with one stone. First, it creates class division. Justice is no longer blind, and the man is keeping you down, giving you a convenient excuse for all the stupid stuff you do that keeps you from making it. You then break down into a tribal survival of the fittest, with government also made up of flawed human beings. But you often overlook that playing referee among the masses. This also creates a capricious society where the rule of law no longer applies, because the rules can always be changed by the next election based on whose passions are the most inflamed at the time. This uncertain dynamic keeps stoking the flames of discontent. Now you're no longer a melting pot of disparate peoples forging into one, but a culture awash in chaos. And never forget, we are agents of chaos. Second, it also convinces the people on the receiving end of the welfare state that they're just fine the way they are. There's no need for them to take responsibility for their own lives and attempt to reach their divinely given potential. As a result, they're essentially caught in no man's land. Too poor to truly be independent and free, too well off to want to. For example, a recent story out of Pennsylvania found a single mother could earn over $80,000 per year in various welfare state benefits. Now, instead of passing on your American dream, you're passing down cycles and generations of dependency. Of course, not everyone who stumbles in life does so from a self-inflicted wound. Sometimes bad things do happen to good people, which are some of my most joyous occasions. Sometimes the rich and powerful prey upon the poor and helpless. Sometimes a corporation preys upon its employees. Sometimes races and ethnicities prey upon one another. But this again is a result of the fact you're rotten at the core. That whole original sin thing we convince you is religious myth, but is as true can be. By doing so, we were then able to convince you that pretty much everybody in an inferior position in the culture is automatically, say it with me now, victim. The introduction of victimology into your culture was the Rosetta Stone that unlocked the rest of what you'll read in this book. And it's also the primary reason you're doomed. No one is accountable for their actions anymore. Everyone has an excuse. And if you don't accept the victimhood, then you're guilty of an offense worse than the one committed by the offender. You're a hater. Originally, it was just those of a more liberal persuasion who bought into this, with women and minorities perpetual targets of some sinister yet unseen institutional white male privilege that gave everybody a get-out-of-jail-free card for their lot in life. Listen, I know what real white male privilege looks and feels like. I and some of my brethren literally possess the bodies of those racists who doused blacks with high-pressure water hoses back in the day. I've lynched a few in my time as well. Now that is some real white male privilege for sure. You don't know what white male privilege truly is nowadays. You're so stupid that even after electing a black man to be president, who attended a racist church that took its words right from our script, you're still suffering from white liberal guilt. This brings me to a quick sidebar. You want to break the heart of your creator? Then do these 3 things, in no particular order. Become an anti-Semite. Devalue and oppress a fellow human being, because you deem them lower than you based on race, creed, color, economic status, etc. Massacre your own children. You will grieve the most powerful being in the universe if you do these 3 things. Because his most important commandments are to love him with everything you have, and then to love your neighbor as you love yourself. You can't obey those commandments if you commit acts that so blatantly go against his nature, such as these. But I digress. Since I and all of hell could give a rip about obeying him, we do these things in abundance, whenever and wherever we can. If it feels good, do it, we always say, and doing these things never feels better than when you're doing them with or for us. Of course, you bags of meat will look to get over on each other any chance you'll get. That's the human condition. But that's a far cry from some institutional racism / xenophobia / sexism, the victimology we planted in your elite cultural enclaves claims you have. You'd think this victimology thing would have jumped the shark when you saw private property, owned by blacks, being looted by black rioters to protest racism in the recent Ferguson riots. But stupid is as stupid does, I suppose. I think I did my job a little too good. Case in point. Ask when you're perpetually offended when America will finally be freed of its inequality. They can't give you an answer. Why? Because they can't imagine America when that would ever be true. They're literally hardwired for victim status. Thus, a culture that doesn't default to victimology would be as foreign to them as a World Series would be to a Chicago Cubs fan. That might be my cheapest shot yet. Don't like the fact that the fewest Americans are working since the 1970s? You're just a racist who hates a black president. Don't like the fact you're paying for the college tuition of illegal aliens? You're just a hater. Think kids are best off being raised by a married mom and dad? You're a bigot. I love this stuff. But wait, it gets better. There's an old saying, treason never prospers. What's the reason? Because whenever treason prospers, none dare call it treason. Turns out what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So now the guys on the right are playing the victim card with regularity. 2. Like if you made some really stupid business decisions. You don't go belly up anymore. Nowadays, you're too big to fail, and your cronies in Congress bail you out. How about if your religious movie fails to gain a following? It's not because your movie sucks. Complete with the ultra-cheesy conversion scene that even other believers think is the cinematic equivalent to fingernails on a chalkboard. Oh no, it's because Hollywood hates conservative Christians. That's why. Which is true, by the way, but your movie still sucks. Better yet, the devil made me do it has now become the devil did this to me. Like the devil got me fired from my job. No, idiot, you were late 3 days in a row. That's why you were fired from your job. Get a freaking alarm clock. Apparently my master is so brilliant, he's now getting credit for the work he didn't even do. All of this excuse making also has a boomerang effect. Since everybody's a victim, that also means nobody is. People grow so tired of hearing the excuses, they have no patience for true injustice now. When someone is legitimately discriminated against, you sigh because it's the boy who cried wolf. Chaos, chaos, chaos. We are now well into your second generation of this welfare state dysfunction, and the decadence is on the rise. Nearly every household, regardless of social status, is now tainted by the sexual revolution that immediately followed the implementation of the welfare state. By the way, that is not a chicken or the egg argument. We had to have the welfare state in place before we introduce a new moral order, because if there wasn't a welfare state already in place, people would still have to pay the consequences for their immoral actions themselves. Then the decadence would have been relegated to the elite classes that could have afforded it, as we've seen in previous eras. Poor and middle-class folks can't afford recreational sex with multiple partners well into their 30s, mistresses on the side, and baby daddies on their own. They need marriage not just for love, but that commitment to also stabilize them financially. This explains why one of the likeliest ways to lower a mother and her children's standing of living is via divorce. The welfare state became the condom of the sexual revolution. It implied protection from the consequences of opening Pandora's box without considering the unintended consequences. Sure, a condom is a reliable way to avoid an unplanned pregnancy, but it doesn't protect you from the baggage that comes from bringing your sexual experiences with other partners with you into your marriage, and the conflicts that creates. It also doesn't avoid the heartbreak that comes from giving the most intimate aspects of yourselves to each other without any real commitment in exchange. Similarly, the welfare state means never having to say you're sorry for your immorality. But it doesn't mean you avoid all the newly discovered STDs, the divorce culture, the pornography gluttony, and family dysfunction that largely didn't exist in your culture until the last 50 years. But since we gave you what your wicked little hearts really wanted deep down all along, pleasure and irresponsibility, you never really stopped to think about that ahead of time, did you? Thanks again for being what you are. I'd almost feel sorry for you if I were capable of empathy. Okay, that's a lie, but I almost had you for a minute. Unfortunately for all of you reading this, the dysfunction is so widespread in your culture now that the decadence is abundant. For evil's sake, I've seen studies that show a healthy segment of your own pastors are currently struggling with chronic masturbation. There are so many sheep without a shepherd. Needless to say, down here we are downright giddy about that. See, with every household now tainted by the decadence, there is no longer a standard to be held accountable to. For anybody that attempts to hold someone else to a standard higher than your base desires is automatically a hypocrite, because at some point they would have partaken in the decadence, too. And the absolute lowest form of knuckle-dragger to be nowadays is a hypocrite. Of course, you could easily combat that argument with humility, transparency, and accountability. In other words, admit that you have also sinned against you-know-who, ask them for forgiveness and the strength to overcome your weakness, and open yourself up to accountability to do right going forward. Then admit, if you do stumble in the future, and get right back up again. But I think we both know you won't do that. You're proud of your dysfunction, and you should be. You're good enough. You're smart enough. And doggone it, people like you. You own your decadence. No one is the boss of you. Anybody that doesn't affirm what you desire is a racist/hater/bigot, a judgmental hypocrite who's condemning you for doing what they're probably doing as well. I say screw them, and so do you. Society shouldn't just affirm your desires. It should also subsidize them. You're the victim here, remember? There, that's it. You're nodding your head in agreement with me, contemplating whether to stop reading for now, because you're feeling that familiar twitch in your loins to go and check out the internet's fleshy spoils once again. Go ahead, your wife and kids are asleep. You're not hurting anybody. We're all consenting adults here, right? Well, except for the girls kidnapped into the sex trafficking trade who are forced into televised prostitution. But that's not important now. It's all about you and your desires. That's what's important here, and always. Besides, isn't she always nagging you with those honey-do lists as it is? And doesn't she go to bed without you most nights with her sweatpants on, which might as well be an all lanes are closed sign? You deserve this. You've got nothing to lose. I mean, it's not like your teenager daughter could walk in on you or anything, colossally embarrassing you and scarring her psyche for life. And it's not like your son might discover what his dad is doing late at night. Pick up your nasty habit and then take it with him into his own family in the future. Set those thoughts aside and do what you do best, put you first. In case you need to be reminded of some of your favorite haunts, I'll subtly suggest them to you now. I'm the still, small voice in your head that sounds like you remember and tells you what you want to hear at times like these. Never forget who's got your back and never judges you. All right then, carry on. This is your show. I'll still be here when you get back. Hell, we might even